story of the leper named Naaman, recounted in the second book of Kings. Naaman was a Syrian, a powerful and wealthy commander in the Syrian army. But he had one problem. He was a leper, and he could not find a cure. After searching, and obviously this is a horrible affliction, he had a servant girl who was a Hebrew who told him, "You should go down to Israel. I'm sure that you could find a healing there." So desperately, he sent a letter down and said, "I'm showing up and I expect you to heal me." So the king of Israel tore his garments. He was incredibly distraught. He said, "We're being set up. This is a setup, and we're going to be invaded." But Elisha sent him word and said, "Don't be afraid, just send him to me." So Naaman comes down, goes to see Elisha, and Elisha sends word to him saying, "Go, bathe in the Jordan 7 times, and you will be cleansed." Naaman's response tells us a lot about the Jordan River. He was insulted and incredulous. And he says, "Are not the rivers of Damascus," his hometown, his home area, he says, "are not the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar, better than all of the waters in Israel? Could I not wash in them and be cleansed?" Now, I've not been to the Holy Land, but I've seen pictures of the Jordan River, and in talking to people who've been to the Holy Land, the Jordan River is not particularly impressive. In fact, it's a little, muddy, dirty river, and it leads to the Dead Sea. Not exactly a stunning body of water. If you think of Maine, with all of our beautiful rivers here, the Androscoggin and the Penobscot, the Saco, Kennebec, I think if the Jordan River was in Maine, we'd call it a stream. As we celebrate the baptism of Christ, it's important to remember that he was baptized not for his own sake, right, but for ours. He entered the water not to be sanctified, but to sanctify us. And he chose the Jordan River. He chose to sanctify the world, to symbolize the sanctification of the world by immersing himself in the Jordan River. The water that's poured over our heads and bestows divine life upon us, the life of Jesus Christ, then, really we could say calls us to enter into the Jordan River with Jesus, right? We're called through the baptismal water to enter into his life, to be more and more immersed into the life of God. But I think sometimes, like Naaman, we can maybe turn up our noses a little bit, or be incredulous, or maybe even afraid when we look at what that means, when we look at this Jordan River. You think about Naaman looking at this thing and being like, what kinds of diseases am I going to get if I go in there? You know, this small, dirty, muddy river. Holiness, we might think, should be inspiring, awe-inspiring, certainly pure and clear. Yet, here comes our Lord wading into the Jordan and telling us that we must follow him into this little muddy, stinky stream that leads to the Dead Sea, and that this is the image of the water of life. This is the water that will be sanctified, and that will sanctify us, that will cleanse us and make us holy, because it is the water where God dwells. Reflecting upon this, we might say, well, what is my Jordan River? What is your Jordan River? Where are we, like Naaman, incredulous that God can be found, that God can heal and restore and sanctify? Where are those stinky little dirty streams that we might avoid? Many things come to mind. Now, I don't want to say that all babies are stinky, but think about just the choice to have children, to raise children. It's not exactly, we might say there are lots of joys, but it's kind of sometimes a stinky joy, right? Especially at first, right? It's not always easy. It's sometimes muddy water. Might think about caring for aging parents, relatives, or neighbors. That may be the Jordan River. Might think of just the challenge of getting to know another person. Most of us, let's be honest, we're not pure, pristine waters. We're a little bit muddy and unclear. Sometimes it's not beautiful waterfalls. The challenge of entering into a real relationship and really loving someone, immersing ourselves in their life, which is sometimes muddier and not clear how to love them. Assisting those who are suffering and the poor. If you go over here to St. Vincent de Paul during the week, this is not the mighty Kennebec, it's the Jordan River. Tedious work, tedious study, having to memorize your multiplication tables or the capitals of all the states, right? Like, this is boring. The Jordan River was not exactly exciting. Cleaning the house, making healthy food, doing the laundry, chores. All of these little, small, muddy kinds of streams that are part of daily life. We're all tempted to seek God and to think that God can be found in these beautiful, grand rivers. But Christ entered into the journey with him, for him to be fully alive in us. And we must not be afraid and not turn up our noses or think it's beneath us to enter into the Jordan rivers of life. Now, Naaman, he was eventually convinced. His servants, they talked to him. They said, look, if he'd asked you to do some crazy thing, you would have done it. Just go. Try it, see what happens. He bathed 7 times in the Jordan, and he was cleansed, he was healed. In fact, it says his skin came to resemble that of a baby. How much more can Christ heal and restore and strengthen and sanctify us when we immerse ourselves into the simple and sometimes muddy and boring and daily streams of life? So what's your Jordan River? Sometimes it's in here, right? Just sitting with the Lord in prayer, not really having anything on our minds. It gets sometimes a little muddy. It's a little difficult to wade into those waters of our own interior life, of just time with the Lord in prayer. But as we see Christ enter into these waters, we know where he can be found. We know where he finds us. Not in the pristine rivers of Damascus, but in the little muddy waters of the Jordan, of our daily life.